On a night when the sky was awash with countless stars, just outside what appeared to be a castle, the land bore the scars of recent devastation. The ground was torn apart, stone walls lay shattered, and silence hung heavy in the air, until a hand emerged from the rubble. A man dragged himself free, his body coated in dust and ash. Somewhere, a voice spoke of a star buried far from the peaks of the night sky, hidden deep where no eyes wandered, yet still a star if it longed to shine and kept light alive within. The words seemed meant for the man himself as he pressed his sword into the ground for support, gasping for air in the biting cold. The scene shifted. Now the man stood before a small building, his gaze fixed on a sword displayed against the wall. The weapon caught the light, glimmering with an almost magical brilliance, and his bright blue eyes traced every line of its blade. He lingered there, lost in thought, when the sound of a familiar voice pulled him back. A woman approached, Ximena, her expression laced with smug certainty, as though she had known exactly where to find him. She carried herself with a hint of mockery, noting that he had been adrift in thought far too often lately. The man, Vlad, bristled at the remark, irritated that she had disturbed one of the rare moments of peace he could claim for himself. But Ximena was unmoved by his irritation. She informed him that people had started whispering about him. The words struck Vlad like a sudden chill. He demanded to know more, but her confidence faltered. She turned away, sidestepping the subject entirely, and instead asked if he still heard voices when holding a stick. Vlad said nothing, his eyes distant, which told her enough. She wondered aloud what sins he might have carried over from another life, for fate had once struck him with black lightning on a clear, cloudless day, an omen as rare as it was ominous. Her tone shifted to caution. She urged him to remain inside for a time, explaining that the new bishop was once a heresy inquisitor, a man renowned for sensing unnatural forces. If such a man decided Vlad was suspicious, he would be sent to the stake without hesitation. The weight of her words pressed heavily on him. Danger was no longer an abstract thought, but a looming reality. Though the bluntness stung, she assured him her warning came from genuine concern. She reminded him that many had witnessed the lightning strike and that rumors had spread ever since. Once more she told him to stop standing in public, pining over the sword day after day, for the eyes of the church were always searching for reasons to act. Vlad ignored the counsel, insisting silently to himself that he would not be treated like a criminal for simply admiring a blade. His stare lingered on the weapon until Ximena's patience broke. She called him hopeless and told him he should simply buy it if he was so infatuated. The price, however, was far beyond his means. When he explained this, she scoffed at the idea that it could be expensive, dismissing it as the work of some back-alley blacksmith and even offering to buy it herself. Only then did Vlad reveal the cost, 5 gold. Ximena froze in disbelief, finding the figure absurd for what she deemed little more than a hunk of metal. She considered how many other things could be bought for that amount, and Vlad added, with a hint of smugness, that such a sum could free her from working for a year. Their attention was drawn away by the sound of an angry voice. An older man had overheard Ximena's insult toward the blade. His attire marked him as a blacksmith, and his pride burned at her dismissal of his work. He barked at them to leave, claiming the sword was not meant for children from the slums. Ximena refused to back down, questioning who else would buy it if not the people who lived here, since the sword was being sold in the slums to begin with. She taunted him further, asking if he had lost his mind. The man was less offended by the jab at his sanity than by the fact that she had called him old. His temper flared, and he accused her of having no manners. Ximena, defiant as ever, pushed harder, suggesting he only made swords for knights because his time was nearly up. Rage built in him until it showed in the form of a throbbing vein along his temple. He snapped, telling her she was right before calling her a foolish child and advising her to return to her shop to wash dishes. For once, Ximena found herself on the receiving end of someone else's cutting words. Ximena bristled at being called a kid, snapping back that she was a grown woman. Tension mounted between her and the blacksmith, but before the argument could escalate further, Vlad stepped in. He took her firmly by the arm and pulled her away, urging her to let it go. Ximena fumed as they walked, insisting to herself that she had said nothing wrong. Behind them, the old man continued to hurl insults, calling her rotten and full of venom. His thoughts turned back to her younger years, blaming himself for giving her too much to eat when there had been so little to go around. As his gaze shifted to the ground, he noticed the deep footprints Vlad had left, a silent sign that the young man had been standing there for a long while. The blacksmith muttered inwardly that Vlad should worry more about making a living than wasting time daydreaming. He reached up, removed the sword from its display, and resolved to finally part with it, selling it to someone who might put it to real use. In his mind, slum-born children never rose above the place they were born. Yet, as he held the blade, his last and finest work, he found himself thinking of Vlad, realizing they were the same, both capable of shining even in a place as dim and forgotten as the slums. The scene widened, pulling back to reveal the heart of the northern economy, Sora. Known as the lighthouse of the region, it owed its prosperity and prestige to the power of the Bayezid family. But even in this city of brilliance, darkness pooled in its slums, where all the filth of the world eventually drifted. Inside a dim tavern, men drank wine and flirted with women. The air was thick with laughter and cheap perfume, until a shirtless man suddenly yanked a woman by her hair, shouting at her for trying to cheat him. She protested, but he claimed she had attempted to sell him fake medicine, something he was confident in spotting after 2 decades as a mercenary. The commotion drew Vlad through the doorway. The mercenary spotted him immediately, recognizing him as the candle maker, and barked at him to fetch the madam. Vlad, expression blank, told the man that seeing her would cost gold rather than silver. The mercenary erupted, furious at being charged so much for what he considered a poorly run business. He demanded to see Vlad's mother if the madam was unavailable and accused him of selling faulty time-measuring candles that burned down too quickly. Vlad countered coldly, suggesting the man should have paid for a longer session if he wanted more time, and mocking him to crawl into his wife's bed instead. The mercenary's anger burned hotter, but Vlad pressed on, offering to prove the candles were fine. If they were faulty, the man could do as he pleased with the woman. The mercenary hesitated, claiming he couldn't trust a scammer, but Vlad's voice turned sharper, his glowing blue eyes locking on the man as he promised to beat him senseless if the test proved him wrong. The candle was lit. Minutes ticked by. At exactly the 5-minute mark, the flame died. Before the mercenary could react, Vlad's staff smashed across his face. As the man stumbled back, Vlad declared the candles flawless and kicked him hard, driving him into another room before locking the door. The mercenary's pleas for mercy were drowned out by the sound of wood striking flesh again and again, Vlad's blows fueled by rage at the insult toward his mother. The noise of the beating carried well beyond the tavern's walls. The following morning, during breakfast, Vlad told George that someone had tampered with their candles. When the madam, Marcella, overheard, she was incensed, vowing to discover the culprit, though moments later she cheerfully admitted it had been her all along. She had sabotaged the candles herself to swindle more money from drunken customers. Vlad was left speechless, realizing he had brutalized the mercenary for nothing. As he descended the stairs, he shrugged the guilt aside, telling himself it was just part of his job. At the bottom, a group of men waited. Their leader, Burley, draped an arm over Vlad's shoulder, praising him for his actions the previous night before shifting to the real reason he was there. He wanted money, claiming he had heard about the tips Vlad earned from candle sales. Vlad's eyes flared with irritation, but Burley waved it off, claiming it was not simple begging. He proposed a trade. From behind him, he dragged forward a boy by the hair, a scrawny, frightened pickpocket. Burley explained the boy was useless and unskilled, offering to hand him over for 40 silver. Vlad recognized the child instantly. His first question was whether Burley had broken the boy's fingers or ankles. Burley assured him there had been no maiming, only a lesson taught. Without further hesitation, Vlad paid the silver, then coldly told them to kill such pickpockets next time instead of bringing them to him. The kid's face went pale, but Burley kept insisting that he and his crew weren't murderers. As they walked away, Vlad reminded him that he was cheating his own family and co-workers, though Burley only seemed pleased with himself for managing to con someone using the vagrant kit. When they were gone, Vlad turned on Ned. The boy stammered an apology, saying he had tried to play it safe, but Vlad only told him to leave after making sure he hadn't broken any bones. Ned thanked him and hurried off, while Vlad stood there thinking about how his plan to earn 5 gold had once again been pushed back. Later, Vlad went to see Harvin, a man in the service of Captain Hoover, the whale hunter. He told Harvin about Ned and the fact the boy had left with all his fingers intact. That earned a surprised look. Harvin remembered the time he'd been caught stealing and lost both his fingers and the use of his ankles, bleeding in the street as young Vlad and Ximena watched. It had been a warning to the rest of the slums. Harvin then mentioned that he had already heard whispers about the candles being tampered with, which surprised Vlad. Rumors were spreading that Marcella was cheating customers, though Harvin didn't believe she was the type. Vlad agreed, though he added that George already seemed aware of the situation. Harvin suggested that if the candles really were being altered, there had to be a serious reason, most likely a desperate need for money. He warned Vlad to tread carefully. There was only one reason an organization would suddenly try to gather funds at that pace. They were preparing for war. George the Whore's Knight, Black Bear the Swine Butcher, Dice the Gambler, Captain Hoover the Whale Hunter, and One-Armed Jack the Moneybug. These were the 5 bosses who ruled the slums of Sora. The shadows of that world were beginning to close in around Vlad. The danger became real when Moneybug himself walked into Vlad's shop, his gang fanning out behind him, asking for Vlad's boss. Vlad froze in disbelief. The presence of One-Armed Jack could only mean war was close. His thoughts were broken by the shout of a man with a ponytail and a scar across his face, who barked at him for ignoring Moneybug and demanded to know where the boss was. A frown crept over Vlad's face as he said he didn't know. He was just a candle seller. The ponytailed man's temper flared. He hurled another insult, slammed his fist into the table, and sent candles scattering across the floor. The workers, especially the women, stood frozen in shock. Vlad didn't flinch. He simply dropped to one knee and began picking up the broken candles, casually saying the shop might as well be closed for the day. The ponytailed man's irritation deepened as his target ignored him. When Vlad told him to move his feet, it was the final straw. The man lashed out with a kick, but Vlad's staff cracked against his leg mid-swing. The man stumbled, and Vlad rose just enough to slam another strike into his face, sending him to the floor. Gasps filled the room. Moneybug looked on with interest rather than anger. Vlad, eyes glowing faintly, held his staff to the man's face. A silent declaration of the back alley rule that the victor stands and the loser lies in the dirt. Moneybug's men moved to retaliate, but their leader stopped them with a wave of his hook. To their confusion, the towering boss said he liked Vlad, even clapping with his single hand. He told the young man to be more tolerant of noise. Vlad answered with a remark about not discriminating against the disabled. Moneybug laughed, genuinely amused, and told Vlad they would speak in private later. His red eyes gleamed as he touched Vlad's face with the hook, asking if he remembered the person he had taken before. Vlad replied that if such a person existed, they must have died early. Before more could be said, one of Moneybug's men called out. Both turned to see George and his men approaching. George made a mocking comment about serving grilled meat if he had known Moneybug was coming, but the larger man brushed it off, saying they weren't close. Still, George played the role of host and suggested they go upstairs. Jack said he preferred good liquor, and George promised that Marcella never disappointed when it came to hospitality. Moneybug's red eyes matched the murderous glint in George's green ones as he accepted the offer. One of Moneybug's men dragged Ponytail to his feet while the boss and his crew headed upstairs. The tension in the room bled away just enough for Vlad to exhale, realizing he had been a heartbeat from death only moments ago. He gathered the shattered candles, counting the damage in his head, when Moneybug's voice called out from the stairwell, singling him out like a spotlight in the dark. The boss was leaving after his meeting with George and Marcella, and apparently, they had spoken well of Vlad. Moneybug claimed he saw the same potential in the young man and told him to seek him out when he tired of the stink of burnt wax. Vlad brushed it off, stating he was fine where he was. He had a bed, food, and a wage, good enough. Moneybug only laughed, assuring him he could provide all that and more. Without another word, the man tossed him a gold coin for the broken candles, a gesture that startled Vlad. It was far too much, but Moneybug refused to take it back, promising there would be more if Vlad ever decided to work under him. Reminding him of the name people feared, Moneybug, he left with his men, cheerful as ever. As soon as they were gone, Ximena's voice called down from upstairs, telling Vlad that George wanted to see him. Moments later, he stood in a room with George and Marcella, staring at a gleaming dagger. George explained it was meant for him eventually, but recent events forced an early hand. Vlad was told to keep it with him at all times, and the mood in the room made it clear the earlier meeting with Moneybug had gone badly. The men were silent, heavy with unease, and even Marcella's expression carried the weight of coming trouble. George then told Vlad to stop selling candles. Confused, Vlad asked what else he should do, but George explained that One-Armed Jack had begun bringing outsiders into the slums, mercenaries, men who had once been knights. Vlad pointed out that they sounded just like George, and the ex-knight confirmed it, the admission laced with fear. Jack's force had always been dangerous, but now, with swordsmen equal to knights, the delicate balance between the factions was gone. George admitted they were already at a disadvantage and told Vlad he would soon have his first mission. The news left Vlad reeling. His thoughts drifted to Harvin, the fingerless cripple who had once been beaten into uselessness but clawed his way back with knowledge, earning a place under Captain Hoover. Harvin's rise was a reminder that effort could overcome ruin. Vlad practiced with his wooden staff, determined to sharpen his skills, until the voice came back. It always came when he trained, telling him to adjust his stance or angle. He'd heard it ever since being struck by jet-black lightning a month ago. To him, it was a cursed whisper, an unwanted intruder in his head. He ignored it at first, but when he accidentally followed its advice, the result was undeniable. Cleaner, sharper strikes, the path of a true swordsman. It was as if he held a real blade, and that terrified him almost as much as it tempted him. Far away, in the frozen mountains, a scarred knight named Stanga cleaned the blood from his sword. He spoke to the winter air, feeling its bite in his bones, then turned toward a rustling in the bushes. Whoever hid there was either a fool or playing a dangerous game. The knight stepped closer, demanding they reveal themselves. A voice answered, asking if he was Sir Stanga. When the figure emerged, the knight's eyes locked on unmistakable blue eyes and blonde hair. He knew the name that came with that face, Vlad. Sir Stanga had heard much about the young man from the slums, especially about his striking blue eyes and blonde hair. He remarked that anyone who didn't know better would mistake him for a noble. Vlad ignored the comment, getting straight to the point of his visit. He handed Sir Stanga a sealed letter from his boss, George. Upon opening and reading the letter, a small smile of amusement crossed the knight's face. The letter explained that the opposing organization had a mercenary who was a former knight, and Stanga finally understood why George needed his help. Seeing that the knight was on board, Vlad offered to guide him back to George, suggesting they would arrive in 2 nights. As Vlad turned to leave, Stanga teased him, claiming it would be foolish to follow someone as stupid as him. Vlad explained that he was at least capable of guiding the knight, but Stanga wasn't convinced. He told the young man that his actions proved he couldn't be smart. Vlad started to get offended, but the knight's purple-eyed glare silenced him. At a loss for words, Vlad was surprised when Sir Stanga finally agreed to follow him. However, the knight swore to kill him if he forgot any routes. Vlad glared back, telling Stanga to try and keep up so he wouldn't screw up his first mission because of him. The young man turned and walked away again, leaving Stanga baffled that his threats were completely ignored. Vlad's boldness amused Sir Stanga, and he concluded that this was why George liked him so much. Though they hadn't spent much time together, the knight saw a child worthy of being nurtured. Later that night, the duo rested in a small cave, sitting in awkward silence by a fire. Stanga noticed Vlad repeatedly looking at him, and growing uncomfortable, he confronted him. He asked Vlad why he kept staring as if he'd never seen a retired knight before. The boy sheepishly admitted that he hadn't, not up close. Stanga asked if Vlad was a country bumpkin, but in response, Vlad asked where Stanga was from. The knight said he was from a place called Dikia, and Vlad exclaimed that it sounded so country. Finding this offensive, Stanga quickly changed the topic, reiterating his earlier threat to kill him if they got lost. He warned Vlad with a mean look not to lose his way, promising to slice him in half if he did. Yet, just like before, Vlad was unfazed. He simply told the knight not to say such scary things, and unwrapped some beef jerky. He mentioned that he had heard a saying, all jokes made by knights are actually threats. Stanga, more interested in the fresh-looking meat than Vlad's words, asked if his share was in there. Vlad said George hadn't given him much, and asked if Stanga had any food. The knight showed his own small, dissatisfying pieces of meat. Vlad skewered his jerky and began roasting it over the fire. The smell made Stanga's mouth water. In desperation, he offered to answer any question Vlad had in exchange for a piece of jerky, calling it a rare opportunity. Chewing a mouthful of meat, Vlad looked at him curiously. After a moment, he simply asked how many pieces Stanga wanted, telling him to just ask. Offended again, Stanga explained that his pride wouldn't allow it. Knights only take something when they give something in exchange. He folded his arms and closed his eyes, unwilling to compromise. Vlad pointed out that he was a retired knight, but Stanga insisted that this belief had guided his entire life. Finally, Vlad asked for his name. Stanga replied. Then he asked for his age, and Stanga revealed he was 42. Stanga suddenly realized that Vlad hadn't given him any meat in return for the answers and called him a brat. Ignoring him, Vlad asked his next question, if he knew how to use aura. Stanga smiled. admitting that Vlad only looked innocent on the outside because of how much he knew. He explained that not all knights can wield aura, and that using it was different from simply possessing it. Sensing Stonga was dodging the question, Vlad asked him again, more directly. The knight smiled and hesitated, making Vlad so anxious that he offered all his beef jerky for the answer. Stonga reminded him of the code. A knight only takes after giving something in return. He decided to show Vlad something special, pulling out his sword and gripping it tightly in front of his body. With his left eye, which bore a scar, closed, Sir Stonga told Vlad to watch carefully as he brought forth his world from deep within his soul. His closed eye began to glow with a magical blue color, as did his sword. The knight explained that this was the essence of knights. The light grew so bright that Vlad had to shield his face. Later that night, the two were making their way to a city. Stonga complained about feeling gross, but Vlad insisted it was better to look dirty and inconspicuous than to draw attention as knights. Stonga clarified that he was talking about his mood, not his appearance. He explained his pride as a knight meant he didn't like the idea of passing through a secret passage and demanded to know why they had to do so. Vlad explained that he was instructed to escort Stonga back secretly, and going through the main gate would compromise that. Even after the explanation, Stonga grumbled like a 5-year-old. Vlad encouraged him to keep moving, promising a bath once they arrived. As they walked through the secret passage, Stonga pointed out how quiet it was, admitting it bothered him. Vlad replied that it was just the time of night, but then they stumbled upon several dead men. Stonga asked if this was a normal occurrence, and Vlad said it wasn't. Vlad concluded that the men had likely fought each other. He then suggested they split up, telling Stonga where a secret back door was, one used exclusively by his organization's members. Concerned, Stonga asked where Vlad would be going. Vlad revealed he would pass through the main gate to split the attention. He told Stonga they would meet up later and walked away. Vlad arrived at the shop to find it completely ransacked. He saw a wounded George, bandaged and being tended to by Marcella. George commended Vlad for making it back safely, but revealed that Moneybug had attacked them first. George had anticipated this, knowing that those with money often possessed another level of strength. A worried Vlad asked George if he was okay. George admitted that it had been a while since he had fought someone on a knight's level, which resulted in his injuries. He was less concerned about himself, however, and more interested in whether Vlad had brought Stonga. Vlad confirmed he found Stonga, but they had to split up because the main gate was being watched. He explained he had given Stonga directions to the back door and speculated that he should have arrived by now. George was pleased, as he planned to attack Moneybug the next day to end things for good. He asked Vlad how Stonga looked, hoping he was in good shape. Vlad confirmed Stonga was okay and even said he seemed like a good person. George revealed that Stonga had a hearty side, and Vlad added that he could be quite nimble. George asked if Stonga had lost weight, claiming one needed to look after oneself to live a long life. Vlad then revealed he knew Stonga could use aura and believed they would be victorious. Instead of cheering, George was shocked by the information that Stonga possessed such strength. Vlad heard footsteps and assumed Stonga had arrived, but before he could leave, George grabbed his sword and told Vlad to get behind him, asking if he was sure Stonga could use aura. In a shocking twist, George revealed that Stonga didn't know how to use such power. Before Vlad could process this, an imposter knight appeared, his sword and coat covered in blood. The imposter greeted George menacingly, telling him he had come a long way and that it had been a long time. A short flashback showed the imposter cleaning blood from his sword in the snowy mountains. He was talking to someone he had just killed, suggesting that the winter wind had gotten into his bones. It was at that moment that he heard a noise from the bushes and discovered Vlad. In the present, the imposter grinned and told George he had changed a lot since they last saw each other. George asked him why he came looking for him now. Upon discovering the imposter, George questions why he has appeared now. In response, the imposter, Godin, reveals that Count Gaidar has passed away. George is visibly shaken by the news. Godin adds that due to complications, the news has not been publicly announced, but it will be soon. Godin, the purple-eyed knight, pours himself a drink and begins to mock the deceased count. He raises his glass in a toast to the pitiful count, knowing it will provoke George. As expected, George becomes furious, curses at the imposter, draws his sword, and charges. Godin remains unfazed, simply holding his glass in the air to taunt George, baiting an attack. Just as George is about to land a powerful blow, Godin dodges with incredible speed, stunning everyone present. George's sword shatters the glass cup, and the onlookers are bewildered by Godin's swift movement. Godin then toasts to the new count, Sigmund, which infuriates George even more. Not only did Godin mock the former count, but he now praises the new, likely corrupt one. The already injured George swings his sword at Godin, who blocks it with his own blade. As the two clash intensely, Godin reveals that Count Sigmund's first order is to have the deserter knight, George, brought back immediately. George declares that Sigmund is not his lord and refuses to obey. Godin admits that the Count did not expect him to return without a fight and did not hope for his safe return. The powerful duel continues, but Godin proves to be the more agile of the two. He dodges a strike to his feet and then another powerful swing to his torso. As the fight escalates, Vlad tells Marcella it is not safe for her to be there. He grabs her and leads her outside to help her escape before she gets hurt. Once outside, the men downstairs call out to Vlad, asking about the noise. Vlad spots Burley and orders him to get everyone upstairs immediately. He tries to explain that their boss is in a deadly fight, but before he can finish, George is sent flying down the stairs. Vlad and Marcella watch in horror as he plummets. The men downstairs are also too stunned to move. Just as George is about to hit the floor, Godin bursts through the wall, questioning George's naive choices. George crashes to the ground with great force. He lies there in pain, surrounded by his confused men. George starts to cough, and Godin glares down at him, waiting to see what he will do next. A dagger, the one George gave to Vlad, suddenly flies toward Godin's head. Godin blocks it with his sword just in time, causing it to bounce away and sink into the wooden floor. Vlad's blue eyes meet Godin's glare, and after a brief staring contest, the knight charges at the injured George. As Godin jumps down for the finishing blow, Vlad yells for George to get out of the way. George hears this just in time and musters the strength to leap out of the way, dodging the strike. Godin's sword sinks into the floor as George falls to his knees and grabs his own weapon. Godin gets up and asks George why he did not just follow his past orders. George replies that he could not carry out such terrible orders because he is a human being with a sense of honor. Godin corrects him, reminding him that he is a knight, not an ordinary human. This makes George furious, and he starts to growl in rage. His men join him, and Godin, seeing he is outnumbered, decides the conflict has gone on for too long. He closes his left eye and says he just wants to rest. Vlad recognizes this move and knows Godin is about to use his aura. He runs as fast as he can to stop him, but it is too late. Godin's sword and eyes are already glowing, and the aura is activated. Blue lines appear on George and his men, marking them as targets. They are unable to stop the attack. A bright, powerful energy is released, blowing back Vlad and killing all of George's men. When the dust settles, Godin is gone, and all of George's men lie lifeless, covered in blood. Vlad groans as he gets up, horrified by the scene. Everyone is dead, and George's face is shown dripping blood to the floor. Vlad is broken as he sees his mentor's demise. He thinks back to his younger days, remembering how George was the first to offer him a helping hand when he was a boy rolling in the dirt. The knight was the first to see Vlad's potential when no one else did. George became the strongest person Vlad had ever known, and now he is dead. As the blue moonlight approaches, Godin is seen holding George's severed head. The impostor had beheaded the only father figure Vlad had ever known. Vlad stares at George's head, hoping it is a dream, but the more he looks, the more he realizes his world has been shattered by the villain he brought into his home. Devastated, he grabs George's sword and yells in distraught. Just as he is about to strike, a voice in his head tells him to stop. Regardless, he swings the blade with great force, but Godin easily dodges it. The knight is shocked to see that Vlad knew how to swing in the sword path, perplexed that a gutter kid from the slums would know this. Godin is impressed, but Vlad does not care. He only wants to kill him. The enraged boy charges him again, yelling for him to die. Godin blasts him with an attack, but Vlad quickly twists his body and deflects it. He finally lands a hit, so powerful that it sends Vlad flying and causes him to lose his sword. Vlad gets back on his feet, stunned by what he just witnessed. Godin concludes that Vlad must have been born with a gift, which is why he instinctively twisted his body and deflected the attack. Although Vlad deflected it, it is clear that his body was hurt from the rapid twisting. He falls to the ground, groaning in pain. The voice in his head urges him to take it easy, breathe, and not lose his focus. Vlad holds his stomach, wincing in pain. Godin watches Vlad struggle and contemplates killing him now. He thinks about snuffing out the light and potential Vlad possesses, but decides it would be a waste, even though he knows Vlad could return with an even sharper sword. Godin remembers when he and George were friends, and George told him he found pleasure in watching over those with great potential. This memory brings a faint smile to Godin's face. He calls out to Vlad, who is still in pain. He tells him that a knight only takes a fair price. A perplexed Vlad asks what he is talking about. Godin tosses back 2 slices of beef jerky that Vlad gave him in the cave. He explains that his name is not Stanga, nor is he 42 years old. He explains that the boy got an unfair price and is now tossing back some pieces to even out the exchange. Godin announced that George's head would be leaving with him. Vlad's gaze locked on the severed, bloodied face of his master, horror gripping him as the impostor claimed the trophy as his rightful prize. Pride radiated from Godin's posture, the arrogance of a victor who expected submission. He held Vlad's stare, waiting for some response. Rage burned through Vlad's grief. His jaw tightened, his glare sharpened, and he swore silently that the man before him would die by his hand. Godin only scoffed and looked away, as if disappointed in the boy's defiance. With casual cruelty, he remarked that Vlad had better not even think about asking for the rest of the payment for the beef jerky, given the miserable state of his life now. Without another glance, Godin turned and began to walk away, leaving Vlad on his knees. Pain lanced through him as he tried to rise. His teeth ground together, breath stuttered in his throat, and the vow to kill his master's murderer burned brighter with every heartbeat. But the impostor ignored him completely, stepping out of the ruined shop with George's head dangling like a trophy. Vlad shouted his name into the dust-choked air, but was met with silence. Godin kept walking, his expression unreadable, until he vanished through the jagged hole he'd smashed into the wall. Vlad's warning followed him into the street. One day, this would be avenged. When the rampage ended, Zemina appeared at Vlad's side, helping him limp from the wreckage. His groans were constant, his hand pressed tightly against the source of his pain. At one point the agony became too much and he dropped to his knees, panting and sweating as if the air itself weighed him down. The scene slid backward in time to moments earlier, when he had curled on the floor of the shop, motionless. Marcella stood over him, voice cutting through the haze of despair, asking if he planned to die here. He gave no answer, staring blankly as though the thought didn't bother him. She sensed it, fury flashing in her eyes, and struck him hard across the face. Marcella's words came sharp and fast. Life in the city center and life in the slums were separated by one thing: opportunity. In the city, failure was something you could recover from. In the slums, one mistake could mean death. She forced him to look at the carnage around them, the corpses of their men strewn across the wrecked shop. This was the price of a single failure. There were no second chances here. The only way forward was to seize the rare opportunities that came, because they might never come again. She grabbed his shoulders, driving her point home until the emptiness in his eyes began to shift. Back in the present, that shift was complete. Determination replaced the vacant stare. Zemina noticed his pain and suggested slowing their pace, but Vlad refused, insisting they keep moving. He would not end his story here. Sweat streaked down his face as he forced himself upright with her help. That was when one of their enemies spotted them, shouting to the others that George's little minion had been found. Adrenaline tore through Vlad's fatigue, and despite his limp, he bolted, pulling Zemina by the hand. She ran at his side, urged on by his command to move faster. Behind them, swords rang as their pursuers gave chase. As they fled, Vlad thought of their destroyed home. The nest was gone. The time had come for 2 young birds to take flight on their own. They managed to vanish into the maze of alleys, leaving their hunters confused and frustrated. The killers cursed and speculated about which way their prey had gone, while their leader, a man with a ponytail and a mouth missing several teeth thanks to Vlad's earlier humiliation, ordered them to scour every corner, promising rewards for the capture. The gang fanned out, unaware they passed the very door hiding Vlad and Zemina. Inside, they stayed still, Vlad's dagger ready, Zemina's hands covering her mouth to smother her cries. Vlad listened to the footsteps and knew escape was nearly impossible. Capture was only a matter of time. He told Zemina that once things quieted, she should slip away. She resisted, reminding him of the promise he'd made to Marcella, but he insisted, before sunrise, she had to reach the convent or, failing that, Harvin. Zemina refused to hear it, throwing a tantrum and refusing to leave his side. Vlad's patience snapped. His voice rose, calling her a fool for never listening, and he told her flatly that he couldn't protect her in his current state. Her eyes welled with tears at the sudden outburst, but before either could say more, a voice outside demanded to know who was inside. The door opened to reveal the blacksmith from earlier. He stepped into the room with a lamp, recognizing them instantly. Zemina, panicked, grabbed a knife and threatened him. He regarded her with weary annoyance, pointing out that they were the ones trespassing. She ignored him, demanding the sword Vlad had been eyeing earlier, the one hanging outside his shop. The blacksmith's confusion faded when he saw the tears in her eyes. Her fear was real. He tried to calm her, but she stood firm, insisting that they wouldn't be safe outside the city and that she needed the sword now. Vlad told her to drop the knife, but she erupted again, screaming at the blacksmith to hand over the weapon. The man studied her and saw something he recognized. This was survival in the slums, taking what you could because no one would give it freely. It was the same instinct he'd had when he was young, and seeing it now, he understood her desperation completely. After a long pause, the blacksmith finally spoke, his tone flat and unhelpful. He called Zemina's situation sad, but the lack of intent to help was obvious. Rage flashed in her eyes, and before anyone could stop her, she charged at him with the knife. The man saw her coming and simply closed his eyes, as if accepting whatever was about to happen. Vlad also believed she meant to stab him, his voice breaking the tense air as he called out to her. But instead of plunging the blade into the blacksmith, Zemina grabbed a lock of her own hair and sliced it off. Red strands fell to the ground, and when the old man's eyes opened, they were wide with shock. With tears streaking her cheeks, she offered him the bundle of hair, admitting it was not enough to pay, but promising to return the debt. Her plea was desperate, her concern for Vlad unmistakable. The blacksmith stood in silence, then asked Vlad if he was leaving the slums. When Vlad confirmed it, the old man looked at him with something like quiet respect. The boy was about to accomplish the one thing the blacksmith had never been able to do, to spread his wings and leave. That thought softened his heart. With great reluctance, he agreed to help them. The scene shifted to the blacksmith hauling a wagon piled high with dirt and refuse, Zemina pushing from behind under the concealment of a hood. The stench drew her complaints, but the old man reminded her it was the only way out of the city. Trouble appeared in the form of a group of goons the blacksmith recognized instantly. They questioned why he was taking out trash so late. He snapped at them, cursing and reminding them they had blocked the alleys earlier with their petty brawl, leaving his smithy overflowing with garbage. The leader's eyes narrowed at the sight of the hooded figure helping him. The blacksmith claimed he had paid a tired boy with bread to do the heavy lifting. Suspicion remained, and the goon stepped forward, lifting the hood with the tip of his knife, while threatening harm if there was any sudden movement. The hood came back to reveal short ginger hair. Zemina played her part perfectly, pretending to be a poor boy desperate for work. Satisfied, the man let her be. Before leaving, the old man asked what they were looking for. They answered plainly, George's blonde-haired boy, dead or alive. The blacksmith scoffed, urging them to get on with it, but the leader insisted on checking the wagon. He ordered his subordinate to search and told the blacksmith to move it aside. The blacksmith hesitated, wondering if this path had been a mistake, but there had been no other option. The subordinate sifted through the piles, commenting on the sheer volume of trash. A faint movement caught his eye. He told them not to take it personally before stabbing down into the heaps with his staff. Fear rippled through Zemina and the old man. Beneath the filth, Vlad felt his breath catch. The goon then spoke, almost casually, about Harvin putting a boat in the water, a strange remark that lingered in the air. He claimed his actions had repaid a debt of 40 silver coins his younger brother Ned owed. And then, with unexpected leniency, he allowed them to pass. The truth was clear. He knew Vlad was there and had decided to let him go out of gratitude. They reached the outskirts, where the city's waste poured into a channel leading beyond the walls. Zemina said her farewells as they dumped the wagon. The blacksmith's thoughts lingered on the star sword now hidden in the trash, a weapon forged from his dreams, paid for with the girl's tears, and now carried by a boy bound for a greater world. Outside the city, Vlad rose from the dirt with the sword in hand. He called to the voice in his head, and it answered. He asked who it was, but the voice admitted it did not know. For someone with such deep knowledge of swords, this was strange. Vlad decided not to dwell on it, instead offering to help the voice recover its memories if it would be his sword in return. Devil or not, it didn't matter to him, not when he thought of the godlike figure who had slaughtered his friends. Against such power, he feared he might be nothing. Hearing his resolve, the voice promised to tell him about the sword. The scene shifted to snowy mountains where a military camp stood under the banner of a noble family. Inside a tent, Joseph Bayezid, second son of the powerful Bayezid family, studied a battlefield map. Moving chess pieces, he murmured to himself that this was too easy. A subordinate entered. Jaeger, a short-haired man with an eye patch, and was greeted warmly. Sensing something was wrong, Jaeger listened as Joseph confessed his unease over the simplicity of the situation. Jaeger reported on the recent monster subjugation. Progress was good, casualties minimal. Joseph's mind, however, was fixed on deserters. In his eyes, any who fled would cast doubt on his leadership, fueling his father's disapproval and giving his older stepbrother Rudiger an opening to strike. In the Bayezid family, where military glory was the highest currency, such weakness could be fatal. Jaeger, hesitant, then revealed there was something else. Joseph guessed it might be a spy from his brother, but Jaeger said the truth was stranger and could only be understood by seeing it firsthand. He led Joseph to the corpses of goblins. The young noble inspected the bodies, unimpressed by the sloppy wounds, as if they had been struck by a child learning to handle a sword. One after another, the kills showed the same crude style, until they came to one that stood out, a cut that drew Joseph's full attention. The goblin's torso lay split open, the clean cut glistening in the cold light. After studying it for a while, Joseph recognized that every wound on the surrounding corpses had been made by the same hand. The precision was too consistent to be coincidence. Jaeger, the one-eyed soldier at his side, confirmed it and added that these bodies had only arrived the day before. The ones Joseph had seen earlier, sloppier kills, were from a month ago. The realization stunned the young master. The crude swings of a month past had somehow transformed into perfect, lethal strikes in such a short time. Skeptical yet intrigued, he pressed Jaeger for more information about the killer. The scene shifted to a snow-covered forest where a band of men fought a horde of goblins. One fighter swung a spiked club with ferocity, holding off several enemies at once. Another urged the group to close ranks before the monsters could scatter. Through the chaos, a spearman stepped on a fallen goblin and shouted to finish the fight quickly. His words died in the air when the soldiers saw the red-eyed hobgoblin looming behind him. The monster's club crashed down, smashing the man into the ground with such force that a plume of snow erupted into the air. When it settled, his head was buried in the frozen earth. Panic threatened the soldiers' resolve, yet they forced themselves to stand their ground. The hobgoblin's roar shook the forest before it charged into them, tearing through one group after another. At the rear, mercenaries began to waver, but their overweight commander ordered them forward. He threatened to withhold pay if they retreated. The men retorted bitterly, accusing him of sending them against a foe far beyond their pay grade, even daring him to face the beast himself. His fury was cut short when the hobgoblin killed the man he was trying to intimidate. Seeing the monster up close drained the color from his face. Then, from among the mercenaries, a blond swordsman stepped forward. They knew him as the praying Ryman. We knew him as Vlad. Calm and fearless, he walked toward the towering beast. The hobgoblin charged, and Vlad met it head-on, slashing at its side. The cut was shallow, a mistake that drew harsh reprimands from the voice in his mind. He admitted to himself that mastering a new technique in one try was nearly impossible, yet he steadied his breathing and prepared again. The hobgoblin swung and missed, each failed strike stirring its rage. It slammed the ground with bone-shaking force, sending snow billowing around them. When the haze cleared, Vlad was gone from its line of sight, only to reappear with his sword glowing faintly in the cold light. His next strike was decisive, cutting deep into the monster's body and ending the fight. Back with Joseph and Jaeger, the one-eyed soldier named the killer the praying Ryman. Joseph ordered him to investigate immediately, though he lingered a moment after Jaeger's departure, staring at the corpses. The leap in skill over a single month seemed impossible. A faint smile curved his lips as he wondered if this man was a true genius of the age. In the snowy aftermath, mercenaries loaded hobgoblin corpses onto wagons. The air buzzed with chatter about treasure, though most found nothing but gore. Vlad, still going by Ryman, oversaw the work as a fellow mercenary praised his performance. The compliments only irritated him. The man kept talking, speculating about their next job and how much more they could earn. Vlad dismissed him curtly, warning him to stay focused. The chatterer, named Gove, hesitated but tried again, hinting that Vlad deserved more money for his skill. The swordsman's patience thinned. He made it clear that unnecessary words could get a man killed. Realizing the danger, Gove backed off and hurried away. Vlad watched him leave, silently deciding he would deal with the man eventually. Turning away from the bustle, he walked into the woods. The others guessed he was going to pray again, something he did unfailingly after every battle. In the quiet of the forest, he dropped to one knee and planted his sword into the frozen ground. The other mercenaries occasionally glanced at Vlad, whispering to each other about how cool he looked in that kneeling posture. Some even speculated that he might actually be a noble, or at least someone far removed from their own class. In truth, he wasn't praying at all. He was being scolded relentlessly by the voice within his sword. He berated himself for failing to finish the hobgoblin in a single blow. The voice agreed, mocking his incompetence and reminding him that the one-hit, one-kill technique depended entirely on the element of surprise. Vlad, too dispirited to decipher the meaning, demanded an explanation. The voice humored him with a clumsy, almost childish answer. He still didn't understand, which only made the voice more irritated. It resorted to the most simplistic analogy: strike at the instant the opponent exposes themselves. But even that failed to click. While Vlad wrestled with the meaning, the other mercenaries continued to watch him in awe, convinced they were witnessing some intense prayer session. The following morning at the soldiers' camp, the men busied themselves after setting up their tents for the night. When breakfast was served, Vlad was handed the same questionable bowl of soup as the others. The rest ate without hesitation, but he eyed the meal suspiciously, uncertain the meat was even real meat. One of the mercenaries, mouth already full, dismissed his concern, saying it didn't matter since the food was free. He explained that mercenaries rarely found employers willing to feed them without cost. Another man suggested the generosity was possible only because they worked for the bides. Someone else added that while the food was overly salty, it was still better than starving. Despite their attempts to make him appreciate the meal, Vlad refused, pushing his bowl toward them and leaving. As he walked out, they speculated that he might be visiting the priest again. One even thought perhaps imitating Vlad's prayers would improve his swordsmanship, though another quickly shut down the idea, bluntly stating that no one could become like the so-called praying warrior. Later, Vlad arrived at the priest's tent. The elderly Father Andreas greeted him warmly. The priest, believing the rumors that Vlad had been praying in the cold forest the night before, expressed admiration for such devotion. No one suspected that Vlad's true purpose in these excursions was to receive killing lessons from the voice in his head. Outwardly, Vlad maintained the role of a devout believer, claiming he had been protected by faith through the cold. The priest laughed, even remarking that Vlad might be more like a priest than he himself was. A young acolyte named Jean entered to announce that the priest's meal was ready. Andreas insisted that Vlad join them and physically guided him to a chair. On the table sat a steaming, appealing breakfast, wheat bread and soup, a welcome change from the mercenaries' dubious fare. Vlad was just about to take his first bite when Andreas, ignoring his earlier protest that he hadn't come to eat, began asking about his swordsmanship. The priest mentioned hearing rumors of his skill and hinted that Sir Joseph Bezid might have heard as well. He explained that Sir Jaeger had visited 2 days earlier to inquire about the blonde swordsman, and that he had personally recommended Vlad to the main troops. He spoke of the Bayezid family's renown in the north, believing service under them would be an improvement over Vlad's current life. The conversation left Vlad uneasy. He later returned to the snowy forest, confiding his worries to the voice. He feared his skill had drawn too much attention. The voice reminded him that such swordsmanship could only be mastered through real combat, and noted that befriending the priest had been the true misstep. Vlad admitted he had approached Andreas to confirm whether the voice was an evil spirit, reasoning that a man with such strong divine power, one who had even been offered a bishop's title, would have detected any malice. Since Andreas had shown no suspicion, Vlad felt somewhat reassured. Still, the more pressing matter was Sir Joseph's interest. Vlad wondered if they should flee before the young master arrived. The voice suggested that the Bayezid family might overlook his false identity because of his skill, though it also warned that discovery of his past crime, killing a mercenary over theft, would condemn him. The voice taunted him as being evil, to which Vlad reminded it that they were both guilty. Eventually, the voice recommended escape, pointing out that self-defense claims required witnesses. Vlad agreed they would run at night and obtain a fake plaque to support a new identity. Before they could finalize the plan, the voice sensed an approaching presence, an advanced knight at the very least. Vlad turned, sword ready, to see Sir Jaeger himself. The knight, impressed that Vlad had detected him, stated that Sir Joseph wished to see him. Vlad, realizing there was no safe escape, decided to act with composure. He followed Jaeger to Sir Joseph's tent, where the young master greeted him with apparent satisfaction at finally meeting the famed praying warrior. Joseph inquired about his work conditions, then remarked on his blonde hair and blue eyes, admitting he had suspected noble heritage. Finally, to confirm his suspicion, he asked whether Vlad's true name was Ryman. Vlad confirmed without hesitation. Joseph closed the blue book in his hands, regarding him with a weighty stare before pointing out that the truth should have been spoken earlier. Without warning, Sir Jaeger's hand came crashing across Vlad's face, the young master making it clear that liars were despised in his presence. The blonde swordsman wiped the sting from his cheek, but Sir Jaeger's gaze never wavered. Joseph revealed what he had uncovered. Vlad was from the city of Sora, born to an unmarried woman. Nothing was known about his father. When Joseph asked if Vlad had any idea who the man might be, the young swordsman's temper flared. His words carried scorn, making it clear that such a question was insulting to someone of his background. In response, Jaeger swept his leg out, knocking Vlad flat to the ground. Pain flared in the boy's body, but he swallowed it down, glaring silently at the knight. Joseph stepped in, dismissing the violence and acknowledging that the question had been both careless and pointed. He stood over Vlad, insisting he knew the reason behind his departure from Sora and demanding to know the source of his swordsmanship. Vlad remained silent, but the weight of Joseph's stare pressed in. Tension thickened in the air until Jaeger drew his blade, moving in to strike. The young swordsman sensed it and, under pressure, admitted to having a mysterious teacher, one who had appeared, trained him, and vanished just as quickly. The man's name had never been shared, only a cryptic lesson about a lone man's secret to eternal victory, a truth to be kept from all others. Vlad delivered this while locking eyes with Joseph, whose composure briefly faltered at the intensity of the boy's gaze. After a pause, Joseph relented, apologizing for the rough treatment. Vlad wondered if his lie had taken root, but the young master cut off his thoughts, explaining his own precarious position. He laid out what he could offer: power, freedom, survival, and a path to knighthood. Later, wooden swords clashed in the training yard. Jaeger faced Vlad in a sparring match as mercenaries gathered to watch. Some were impressed at how well the young swordsman held his ground, others insisting the knight was merely humoring him. Still, all acknowledged the boy's skill and his luck in securing such a mentor. Jaeger made his opinion clear mid-fight, calling Vlad arrogant and undeserving of speaking so casually to Joseph. The knight fought with one hand behind his back, pressing him with relentless strikes. Vlad quickly learned there was no escaping the man's rhythm. Every dodge was met with another attack too powerful to block. Shifting tactics, he caught one strike, slipped his blade under Jaeger's, and broke free for a counter. His eyes lit with focus as he struck, drawing cheers from the onlookers. But deep down, Vlad suspected Jaeger had allowed the moment to happen. The match ended with Jaeger announcing twice daily sparring sessions. Vlad's stomach sank at the thought. One round had nearly broken him. The knight walked away, advising him not to cool down too much. Alone, Vlad muttered to the voice in his head about Jaeger's coldness, receiving only a reminder that pain was part of growth. In Joseph's tent, Jaeger reported on what he had seen. Vlad's skill was undeniable, enough to catch the attention of nobility, but arrogance clouded his judgment. Joseph was unbothered, attributing it to a rough upbringing. Manners could be taught, he argued, and Jaeger was the man to do it. The knight resisted, warning that a disloyal sword could never be trusted. Joseph preferred to let Vlad's true nature reveal itself, planning to keep him contained in a cage so vast he'd believe himself free. Elsewhere, the mercenaries wrestled with their new reality. Some envied Vlad's escape from the expedition team. Others grumbled about the leadership change. One soldier, Go, was jolted from his thoughts when their captain, Sir Roderick, began speaking to a strange woman searching for her child. The captain's words suddenly fell silent, and moments later, he walked away into the forest, an unnatural aura swirling around him. Far from the scene, Vlad sat nursing sore muscles, grumbling about Jaeger's harshness. The voice within reminded him that being pushed by such a knight was nothing short of a rare opportunity. The voice reminded Vlad of the long line of people who would pay to spar with an advanced knight, emphasizing the value of such an opportunity. Despite this, Vlad insisted that Jaeger just wanted to beat him up, seeing him as a stubborn and arrogant child. The voice countered that such conditions make for a better sparring match, as the motivation to stay alive would make Vlad fight more effectively. Vlad was momentarily speechless, then pointed out that the conditions were still upsetting. As he argued with the voice, a whisper from the bushes caught his attention. The owner of the voice, Go, revealed himself from behind a tree. Vlad was surprised to see him, as the rest of the expedition squad hadn't returned. Go looked around suspiciously, scanning for unwanted listeners. When he was sure the coast was clear, he revealed he was planning to run away from the camp at nightfall. Vlad was in disbelief and demanded an explanation. Go became more mysterious, telling Vlad to remember that he was only visiting him out of concern as a friend. He made a vague statement and suggested they meet later for some fun. Confused, Vlad thought Go was talking nonsense, but the man insisted he had seen something in the woods with his own eyes and claimed the woods they were to explore were cursed. Vlad was alarmed and intrigued. Go explained that while they had had deserters before, the mercenaries no longer ran away because the Bayezid family paid them well. Vlad agreed, but Go revealed the shocker. The deserters were not deserters at all, but people who had gone missing, taken away by the cursed woods. Vlad looked worried. Go claimed to have seen a ghost take people into the woods. Vlad then smacked Go on the head, calling him a rascal for his unrealistic theories. As Go tried to convince him, he revealed he had seen a knight taken away the previous night. Vlad immediately knew he was talking about Sir Roderick. Gerda confirmed it and revealed that all the missing people had black hair. A while later, Gerda was seen cursing and swearing in regret. He was terrified because his little mission had been foiled. Sir Jaeger and the rest of the mercenaries arrived with Gerda leading the way. Gerda cursed his own goodwill and regretted not running away with his stuff when he had the chance. Now everyone knew about the curse, and he had been instructed to lead them to the place. As Gerda mumbled like a coward, Jaeger noticed his strange behavior and asked Vlad if he was sure they could trust him. Vlad admitted he didn't trust the man at all, but that he wasn't crazy. Jaeger thought about how young Master Joseph saw this as an opportunity, as discovering a trend in the woods would be beneficial. However, Jaeger admitted to himself that the investigation bothered him. He thought about how all the missing people had black hair, and he was uncomfortable going on such a mission, since he also had black hair. He asked Vlad to confirm the hair color information. Vlad replied that 3 knights were at the post in case something happened. As an advanced knight, Jaeger found it hard to believe in others' abilities. He realized that despite his worries, he had no choice but to be the vanguard, as Sir Roderick was already missing and someone more skilled needed to step up. Jaeger was deep in thought when Gerda brought him back to reality, revealing they had reached the expedition camp. Jaeger met a man named Iran, who introduced himself as Sir Roderick's subordinate. Jaeger asked if he was certain their captain was nowhere to be found, and if they had checked the entire forest. Iran confirmed they hadn't found a single trace, even with ex-hunter mercenaries leading the search. Jaeger realized he had to check the woods himself. Still on his horse, he ordered the mercenaries to search in groups of 3 and spread out as far as they could see. The mercenaries complied and began the search. Sometime later, Gerda tried to challenge Vlad, accusing him of being a fraud who took advantage of people's good nature for ratting him out. Vlad told him to stop talking and focus on the search, promising to compensate him later. They came across Jaeger, who asked if they had found anything. Vlad said no. Jaeger got upset and called them useless country bumpkins, but Vlad defended himself, pointing out he was from the city. Jaeger asked how he found missing people in the back alleys. Vlad said it was simple. You grab someone and beat them up until they tell you where the missing person is. Jaeger was even more certain that Vlad was useless after hearing this strategy. He then noticed the sun was setting and nightfall was near, and wondered if he should return to camp. He pondered this for a moment and noticed the river. He asked Vlad and Gerda if the mercenaries had searched beyond it. Go claimed no one had, as it wasn't on the expedition path. Jaeger thought about how there was no trace in the woods, even after searching twice, and concluded that they likely wouldn't find Sir Roderick or the strange woman Gerda mentioned. He ordered the men to gather, informing them they would be crossing the river. Go obeyed and signaled the others. Jaeger took the first step on the ice and confirmed it wasn't completely frozen. Vlad pointed out that it was probably because winter was over but felt it was strong enough to cross. Jaeger agreed, but suggested that splitting up to cross would be safer. The other mercenaries met up with Gerda, thinking he had found Sir Roderick. He explained that he hadn't, and Jaeger then informed them that they would be expanding the search area by crossing the river. He admitted it wasn't completely frozen and said they would divide into 3 groups to cross. The mercenaries agreed and quickly split up. Along the way, Gerda began acting strange. Vlad asked what was wrong, and Gerda expressed a bad feeling that something was about to go wrong. Vlad downplayed his hunch, accusing him of being afraid. Gerda admitted he was scared, saying he wasn't as great as Vlad and Jaeger and needed good intuition to survive. He said his intuition was telling him they shouldn't be crossing the river. Vlad replied that while he didn't know about intuition, he was certain that if Gerda ran back now, his death wouldn't be pretty. He threatened to kill the mercenary if he tried to escape, as he was their only clue. Gerda was terrified. Vlad told him to quit talking about his hunch, and that crossing the river was his only way to survive. Vlad got on the ice and told Go to follow. Go, realizing he had no choice, took his first steps, shaking as he thought the ice could break at any moment. Vlad, fed up with the man's cowardly behavior, assured him that even if the ice didn't break, he would break it himself and dump him in the water if he kept rambling. In a magnificent display of cowardice, Gerda began crawling on the ice, claiming he couldn't cross. A pissed-off Vlad pulled him by the shirt, telling him to get up because they were the only ones left behind. As Vlad tried to pull him up, Gerda screamed in terror like a maniac. Vlad was upset by his antics, but realized why he was screaming when he looked into the water. Gerda had been horrified to see corpses. He screamed at the top of his lungs to warn the others that there were dead bodies in the river. Suddenly, the dead men beneath the ice appeared to be swimming up, and the ice began to break. The mercenaries panicked, running on the ice, hoping to make it to the banks. Unfortunately, they didn't make it off in time and found themselves surrounded by the dead. The zombies crawled toward them, and the confused mercenaries asked Sir Jaeger what to do. The knight finally realized that the whole mission was a trap. It was as if the zombies knew they were coming and had set an ambush. They were now stuck in the territory of night and darkness, which was not meant for the living. While Vlad, Jaeger, and the others were confronted by the undead army, the scene shifted back to the main camp. A priest was praying to the Lord, thanking him for looking after his people, with a young priest in training beside him. He prayed for the Lord to guide them with his light. Suddenly, the priest stopped praying, and the boy became worried. He called out to the priest, and the place began to shake. The water in a chalice started to rumble until it floated out and moved in the air, leaving the priest in a state of bewilderment. The dark water continued to move until an ominous woman appeared. She emerged from a dark fog that formed around the camp and began walking, looking for her child. The fog surrounded her as she walked. Meanwhile, back on the icy battlefield, a massive fight had broken out between the living and the dead. The man they were searching for, Sir Roderick, had already been turned into a zombie and was mindlessly fighting his former men. The undead knight roared and tried to hit the cowardly Gerda, who just screamed. Before his former captain could kill him, Vlad arrived, slashing zombie Roderick with his sword. The other agitated zombies charged at Vlad with blistering speed. Our hero quickly braced himself, his eyes glowing white once again. He struck a beautiful sword stance and, with incredible speed, slashed all the zombies in his path. Gerda screamed in fear as severed body parts flew around him. Irritated, Vlad called Gerda a rascal and told him to get up and fight with a spear, but the mercenary insisted he was too terrified. Vlad grew angry, seeing the man as a liability. The voice in his head tried to calm him, advising him to pick a direction to escape. Vlad looked ahead and saw 3 zombies emerging from the water, their gazes fixed on him, making it clear he couldn't go forward. He started to wonder if Sir Jaeger was safe, as they had been separated during the ambush. Elsewhere on the ice, the senior knight was effortlessly slicing up zombies. Even a great knight gets tired, however, and when he saw a zombie kill one of his men, he admitted there was no end to the undead. He believed whoever planned the trap had thought of everything, and, while he didn't know the mastermind, he was certain who the intended target was. With that in mind, Jaeger's left eye began to glow green under his eye patch, and his sword began to glow with the same color. Using his aura, he took on all the zombies confronting him, annihilating them in a single go. In a bright and epic display, Jaeger wiped out the undead. The spectacle was so intriguing that other mercenaries stopped to watch. They were delighted to see him in action and were even more motivated to fight, knowing they had someone like him on their side. In the middle of his intense fight, Jaeger called out to Vlad, telling him to fulfill his contract and defend the right post. Our hero, who was dealing with another zombie, was alarmed. He yelled back, and the advanced knight's plan turned out to be simple. Vlad was to protect young Master Joseph at all costs as a hired sword. Without hesitation, Vlad received the order and fought the remaining zombies in his path to find his way out of the icy battlefield. As he ran, he told the cowardly idiot Gerda to come with him. Gerda, who was already yelling for him to wait, followed. As Vlad left the battlefield, Sir Jaeger's left eye glowed so brightly that it produced a green flame underneath his eye patch. The advanced knight prayed that our hero would reach the young master in time. He was surrounded by the dead, but all he could think about was the safety of the one he served. Jaeger then resumed his battle, slashing the undead creatures. Eventually, he heard a growl behind him. Even though he was occupied with other undead warriors, he sensed a new presence. He quickly turned to face the threat, which was the zombified Sir Roderick. The knight apologized to his former comrade for being late in his rescue, but zombie Roderick and the rest of the undead army were already beyond saving as they aimed for his life. Meanwhile, back at the main camp, young Master Joseph was in his tent alone, looking bored as he read a book. Suddenly, he heard someone yelling. Alarmed, he wondered who made the noise, then heard the person telling someone to get away. He realized that the camp was being invaded. Joseph got up from his chair to leave, but a man named Borden entered and called out to him. The young master asked what the commotion was about. Borden, still out of breath, stammered and didn't have an explanation. Joseph got upset and asked if he had run into the tent without first finding out what was happening. Borden, who was guilty as charged, claimed he had run into the master's chambers to check if he was safe. He insisted that Joseph's safety was his top priority, but the young master knew he was lying. The fact that Borden had run into the tent without a sword or weapon proved that he hadn't come to protect him. Joseph confronted him for not arming himself, and Borden's empty sheath was now on full display, making him realize his sword was missing. Joseph threatened that he would have hanged this imbecile on any other day. Hearing this, Borden immediately began begging for forgiveness. While that was happening, Father Andreas and some other men entered the tent. Joseph asked the priest if he knew what was going on. Before he could even finish his question, Father Andreas told him that something evil had visited the camp. The priest opened his holy text, and Joseph was shocked to see the pages trembling. Father Andreas admitted it was no ordinary object. A nervous Joseph asked if they could stop it, but the priest replied that he wasn't an exorcist. He assured Joseph he would use all his divine powers to ward off the evil, but confessed that the being was so powerful he might not be much help. Joseph grew more nervous, thinking of a solution. He knew his remaining knights weren't much use, but they were his last line of defense. He got up and instructed the knights to follow him. They followed with straight faces, ready for business. When Joseph came out of his tent, he was shocked to see a thick, ominous fog covering everything. This fog not only obscured the vision of the mercenaries, but also possessed them, forcing them to fight for control over their bodies. The strange woman from earlier was certainly responsible, as the possessed men seemed to be taken over by a spirit calling them her children. Despite their struggle, they could do little against the supernatural force. Joseph covered his nose to avoid inhaling the fog and asked Father Andreas if it made people delirious. The priest didn't know for sure, but he was certain it was not a natural phenomenon. It wasn't long before the dangerous fog reached them. Joseph realized he had inhaled it and started to hear the strange spirit call him her child. The priest and the other men also experienced the same thing. The spirit woman continued to search for her child around the camp. When they finally saw her, they were horrified by her vile appearance. With long black hair and a creepy white gown, she walked barefoot in the middle of the fog, continuing her search. She turned to Joseph and asked if her child was there. The men around him became terrified at the sight of the apparition's face, but Joseph just stood speechless with a napkin in his hand. The witch's black mouth and eyes widened as she screamed that she had finally found her child, revealing it was none other than the young master himself.